Yeah, first of all, thanks for the invitation. Thanks to everyone for turning up 15 minutes before a very important semi-final. I hope you'll all be hate watching Argentina as I will be. But just to get into it and not to take up too much time, first, PYM is a transnational organization of Palestinian Arab youth in the diaspora struggling for the liberation of our homelands. In terms of my intervention today, I think there's three main components. I think it would be good first to start with like a wider overview of the campaign against the Great Israeli Real Estate Event, the PYM's sort of historical approach to policing and how we typically do things. Realize this was a very exceptional circumstance with the event, and then how we sort of thought about the day itself, how we sort of thought about our orientation towards police going into the mobilization, knowing everything that we sort of knew at at the time, and then maybe a few reflections if we have time for that. So just quick background. The Great Israeli Real Estate Event is a rotating series of exhibitions primarily held in the US, Canada, and has been in the UK before. It's known for not only advertising sort of real estate sales in Israel proper or the Palestinian land occupied in 1948, but also land in the West Bank and Jerusalem, which are internationally recognized to be occupied and are illegal, essentially forced settlements. So previously, organizations in the US and Canada, including PYM chapters there, have mobilized against these events, and they've had various degrees of success. Typically, they have been surrounded by controversy, accusations of anti-Semitism, as the event organizers have, for the most part, shielded themselves within synagogues. So this has been the practice that we've seen abroad, and it's the practice that we sort of saw here as well, but I'll get into it. In terms of how like we came across this, essentially we got a tip from a journalistic source saying a week out from the event itself that in the UK, this was happening in London, but with the caveat and complication that it was also likely to be happening within a synagogue here in London. And this had actually happened in London before in a synagogue as well, the Finchley United Synagogue. We thought it would be the same area, but that turned out to be different through as the sort of week progressed, ending up in the Edgware United Synagogue as well. So despite this happening before, there was no real challenge to it that we sort of saw, or at the time we weren't either as an organization PYM or as the movement in a position of sufficient strength to actually challenge this. But we saw this time around, and with the experience of the past 2 years and of the genocide and of mobilization and of building structure and organization, that really, as a PYM, as a Palestinian and Arab organization, committed to that struggle for national liberation, we saw this confrontation as really like a test of both our political principles and the most direct and clear confrontation of Zionism that you can actually have here in Britain or in the diaspora. It's a direct sale of Palestinian land in occupied territories happening in London, right under our noses. So I think we were concerned at first in terms of, yes, this is likely to be difficult, this is likely to be fraught. But in terms of actually living up to the moment, we saw no other option but to mobilize. We saw no other option but to confront this event and stop it from going ahead. Um, but like aside from the mobilization itself or the decision to take on the mobilization, we did see an opportunity and a need for a wider sort of multifaceted campaign that had larger political sort of objectives than the protest itself or shutting the event down itself in a sort of isolated incident. Um, we we believe, like in the PYM, that this approach of always having wider set political objectives for every action, wider organizational objectives, that fit within the sort of movement, the direction of the greater like Palestine movement in Britain is something like we really emphasize as an organization, and I think what allows us to multiply gains uh, rather than just an isolated protest that might succeed, might not, and then we do something again and again and again without a clear sort of achievement or gain beyond that particular day. Um, for this campaign, what we essentially ended up doing was having multiple tracks covering first parliamentary outreach, second legal challenges and notices, third there was media commentary throughout the week, fourth there was a digital action sort of directed at the powers that could shut this down, namely Barnet Council and in addition to that was the constant threat daily of we are going to mobilize. We might not know the location or the location hasn't been announced, but we will mobilize. We set up a broadcast channel for the mobilization, essentially building that momentum through each thing. So every time a letter would go out, we would have a mobilization statement, essentially building that pressure. But the aim here wasn't only to sort of push the movements and politicians on certain political lines that are more favorable to Palestine and that take on more of an anti-Zionist sort of leaning, but also to gain condemnation that would then grant us cover for the mobilization itself. The core idea was to use that low-hanging fruit of internationally prohibited land sales, of land sales in the West Bank, of land sales in Jerusalem that are recognized by United Kingdom government and that is sort of very easily condemnable by the wider media establishment. And that was advertised by the land sale event itself. They weren't hiding this to not only get recognitions for things like the right of return in the all-party parliamentary Palestine group, which more than 100 MPs signed, or the use of language like historic Palestine by Zach Palansky in his letter to the mayor of London, but to really whip up that condemnation and sort of get even Sadiq Khan to come in and say, well, this shouldn't be happening in London, it should be condemned. I think that together really framed the event as illegitimate and by contrast positioned our threat to mobilize as justified despite wherever this land sale event might actually happen. Um, so I think that political cover actually allowed us to mobilize on the day, whereas maybe our assessments were before that this would not be allowed to go ahead. And we can sort of get a bit more into that. And as well as achieving sort of larger political objectives. Yes, pushing movement lines in terms of historic Palestine, anti-Zionism, stuff like that, but also denormalizing events like these beyond a single protest. Like now, this event is known. If it happens again, the reaction is expected. Events can and have pulled out. So in that week, an event space did pull out in terms of hosting this. We have proven our ability to disrupt. It is no longer for the organizers of this event something that they could normally organize for and have without the expectation of a significant pushback and significant movement demands of their elected politicians and expectations for accountability in the aftermath. And I think sort of the media coverage leading up to the mobilization and even after the mobilization really verified this as an achievement. So the narrative wasn't allegations of anti-Semitism and targeting Jewish communities in North London, but really did focus on the illegal sale of Palestinian land across the spectrum of sort of British news. I mean, from left to right, the narrative was illegal Palestinian land for sale and people have mobilized. Yes, they have mobilized to a synagogue because that's where the event organizers held it. It wasn't simply protesters turn up to synagogue and et cetera, which is sort of maybe what the expectation was and what had been repeated in the US and Canada without similar wider campaigns. So I think that's a really sort of, I think, machine gun overview of the campaign itself and where it led us. I think the second aspect that I want to speak to is the PYM's approach to policing and really get into sort of the depth of why we're here today. I think the PYM, as we recognize ourselves, is an anti-imperialist organization. We recognize Britain as both the originator of the colonial project in Palestine, but also a continued partner in the support of Zionism and in the upholding of imperialism in our region. And looking towards the domestic side here, we see this role actually played out in the suppression of the Palestine movement. We see the police not as a neutral party that is simply sort of shepherding protests around and being fair to both sides, but essentially a proactive tool in the suppression of the Palestine movement and a co-legislator in a lot of the powers that have come in to disrupt what we're doing and to suppress us. So that comes through the prescription of Palestine action, the powers against repeat protests, Section 68 to stop activists from masking, using Schedule 7 counterterrorism laws against activists at ports of entry and exit, and even using sort of Israeli lobby lines on anti-Semitism and threats to Jewish communities, and Jewish communities sort of feeling a sense of fear through peaceful sort of Palestine movement protests that have been happening over the past 2 years. So the more practical side of this is we see police coordination as essentially blunting our ability to be disruptive on the ground and to achieve political goals through mobilizations, no matter the type of action. Typically, as the PYM, yes, we do turn up to national protests. We have blocks, which are typically also very heavy-handedly policed because we are an Arab and Palestinian bloc. But beyond that, when we do mobilize, it's typically to support a particular campaign, whether it's stuff like Siege on Labor, Mask Off Maersk, whether we're targeting sort of political actors or corporate sponsors of the genocide. We try as much as we can to achieve political aims through pickets, through site takes, through things like that, that informing the police of or coordinating with the police with would essentially negate their effectiveness. We would either be shunted off to the side, unable to sort of achieve what we want to. We could be sort of cordoned off. We could be all of these things. And second, when it comes to a lot of these smaller protests or really a threat is being sectioned by the police. It is being dispersed by the police, and coordinating with the police through let's say a police liaison sort of system would mean we have prior knowledge of a section or have been informed of a section while actually on the site. Meaning if we ignore that order, then we are subject to arrest and can be pursued through it. So I think this is generally how we approach or how we conceive of the police. And we see it really in typical situations as being a non-starter. And we try as much as we can to headline achieving our wider political objectives and goals for the mobilization and for the wider campaign, which is something we constantly refer back to and sort of synthesize and adjust, rather than being reactive to police demands or directions, either before a mobilization or during the day. At the end of the day, we want to be as effective as we can be, and in our estimation, this is not sort of the direction that we assess is the correct one. In terms of how we orientated policing towards policing on the actual day of the Great Israel sort of real estate event, I think we went into it with an assessment that either the grounds of the synagogue or the wider area would be sectioned beforehand. So our sort of demonstrator for this was a May 2025 picket attempt by sort of anti-Zionist Jewish comrades who attempted to picket the Israeli ambassador to the UK in an area in Finchley, and the police essentially emplaced a section on the entirety of the area, on the entirety of Finchley, actually, saying there can be no protests in this area. Anyone who does mobilize will be dispersed. I think that is the principal assessment that we went in with, given that there was no precedent for this level of action, we believe in Britain over the past 2, 3 years in terms of its actual seriousness and potential impact, and the sort of growing narrative, both in the media and through government, of threats to Jewish communities, of a Palestinian Arab organization, of the wider Palestine movement calling for a protest in that area. I think the assessment was this would be very heavily policed and would be very heavily suppressed. So the inclination was not to coordinate our action. One, because we didn't want to sort of be told, actually, no, there will be a section on this area, you can't turn up, and then be faced with the sort of conundrum of opposing that and opening ourselves to risk of arrest and then legal liability. And two, we didn't also want to provide the police with enough knowledge to be able to actually take the energy out of the protest. To, okay, you can protest, but you can protest several blocks away or several streets away without actually being able to effectively disrupt the event or shut it down, or any of the things that, despite the on-the-day policing sort of not being what we expected, perhaps not things going to plan, was an actual achievement. So I think as we saw footage from sort of anti-Zionist Jewish comrades who were able to get into the event, that it was literally dozens of people inside of there, in comparison to previous events where they had more than 1,000 people at the event. So I think that is essentially how we sort of conceive of policing and how we approach policing on the day or leading up to the day. But in turning up, we found actually the complete opposite of what we were expecting. We found a sort of a symbolic police presence, unable to either control the counter demonstrators or to provide cordon for sort of the mobilization we called for. We found a lot of things that I think other guests would perhaps be better suited to speaking to. I was there on the day. I was witness to all of this. There are videos of me running out of a car with our megaphones and being surrounded by counter demonstrators. But I think other guests will take on this part, unless Mizan, you have a direct question to me right now.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. We'll leave the questions and answers till the end. But yeah, that was a very good brief overview of how you guys approached the event, your relationships with the police, and basically what happened on the, your understanding of what happened on the day. So yeah, thank you so much. I do have some questions, but we're gonna put that to the end. Yeah, so basically after the event, um, I put up my statement about what happened, and then people were telling me to get in touch with NetPol because basically NetPol were doing a lot of research into what happened on the day, and that's how I got to know Kevin Blow. Kevin, obviously, I think I emailed Kevin or I emailed NetPol or one or the other, but we kind of got connected, and I gave Kevin my statement, and when I read the report, it just captured everything I felt on the day, to be honest with you. So next up, I'd like to give the floor to Kevin. Kevin is from NetPol, they're like a grassroots police monitoring organization fighting, basically challenging state police corruption and oppression. Kevin can explain that further. But Kevin, if you'd like to take the mic and explain the findings of your report, and also if you can explain any kind of responses you've had from the police, that would be great. Okay, thank you so much.
I will try to do that last bit, although there's not as much to say about as there about the report itself. So, as Mizan said, NetPol is the network for police monitoring. I was one of its founding members. For the last 17 years, we've been involved in monitoring the policing of political process on the policing of local communities. I'm very happy to be here to talk about our work. We have done research before on a much grander scale, but I wanted to just flag up one thing at the beginning about why we called the report One Day in Edgeware. And actually why we produced a subsequent report which is called One Day in Manchester, which was about police violence against anti-fascists back in April, and why we've got another one coming up which is called One Day in Brighton, which is about the recent far right demonstration in Brighton and the pepper spraying of demonstrators there. The kind of one day thing is because, as serious as each of these moments that are captured in these reports are, they're unfortunately far from uncommon. Over the space of the last decade, NetPol has documented an increasing crackdown on the right to protest that's happening every day in different ways in different parts of the country, most of which is either not reported at all by the media, or when it is often reported very badly. And that's the starting point for how this report came into existence. So the day after the protests against the Great Israeli Real Estate Event on the 15th of June, I was sat in court for the Royal Courts of Justice in central London, waiting for the latest ruling to come down on the ban on Palestine action. I'm sat next to somebody chatting with them who says to me, "Oh, did you hear what happened yesterday?" And I said,
Yeah, go.
and I said, can you hear me at all?
Yeah, I can hear you. Carry on.
Getting feedback, sorry. And so I said to that person, yeah, I've seen the BBC headline that says something along the lines of police arrest 14 against protest outside synagogue. And the implication that it was a protest, that a place of worship had been the target of protesters. But that's all I managed to pick up. And then this person then started to recount to me the frankly terrifying experiences that they'd been through. And it was immediately clear that we needed to gather as much detail as we could while it was still fresh in people's memories and pull that together into a report. We wanted to turn that round as quickly as we could because 2 weeks from that date, the new section 164 of the Police and Crime Act, the 2006 Act, was coming into force, which covers restrictions on protests at places of worship. And I want to come back to that a little bit towards the end of the discussion that I've had. But anyway, so we did a call out. It was largely done through people who were there, through networks that we knew, and the testimonies that we gathered are set out in some detail in the report. And if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, I would strongly urge you to take a look. Essentially, what it describes is anti-Zionist Jewish activists and allies from the PYM and others were ambushed and attacked by violent Zionist counter-protest. It was also clear that this had been planned in advance. The ludicrously a much misnamed group called Stop the Hate had advertised it online as the Battle of Edgeware and deliberately compared it to the famous Battle of Cable Street in 1936, which has got an anniversary coming up in this October, with the opponents of genocide cast within this battle as the black shirts, as the fascists. But it was quite clear, and one of the contributors to our report said this to us, it's hard to view this as anything other than the explicit intention to violently confront the protesters. And that's what happened. And yet the Metropolitan Police stood by and they allowed these attacks to take place. The report itself documents shocking examples of verbal intimidation, death threats, acts of physical violence against protesters by the Zionist counter-protesters, crimes that the Metropolitan Police officers witnessed but failed to intervene against. It also describes incredibly violent anti-Arab and racist, invective, sexist abuse from the Zionist counter-demonstrators, all of which are hate crimes, that the Metropolitan Police officers chose to ignore. And what the report concludes from that testimony is that the police inaction was a failure in their legal duty and their legal obligation to provide a heightened level of protection to the right to protest outside of this event. Even the one, I guess you'd call it, positive decision made by the police to protect people, which was to escort anti-Zionist protesters safely back to Edgware Underground Station after the demonstration, was twisted by political adversaries into claims that they were holding an intimidatory march through a Jewish neighborhood. And over the last 6 months, the police have repeatedly made pledges to counter this kind of false and misleading claims that are likely to fuel further public disorder. And yet the Metropolitan Police failed to immediately take steps to publicly correct that disinformation. Instead, what happened on the Sunday morning, as all this was kicking off, and at exactly the same time these attacks were taking place, the Board of Deputies of British Jews had issued a press release that insisted that allegations against the Great Israeli Real Estate Event had been, quotes, publicly refuted. As we now know, this narrative very quickly began to unravel because it was clear that the organisers of that event had lied about ensuring that no property in illegal settlements was being marketed. It was equally clear that the Board of Deputies and what they dismissed as a wholly unjustified protest, in fact, was the exact opposite of being based on false pretenses, and it was entirely valid and entirely legitimate. And yet, at the moment when numerous individuals, many of them Jewish, were being assaulted, were being subject to vile racist and sexist abuse, the press release was condemning their presence outside of Edgware United Synagogue as little more than an excuse to harass and intimidate members of the Jewish community. That press release then went on to demand that the police use the new powers I mentioned earlier as soon as possible to restrict protests to ensure, quotes, such protests are kept a significant distance from places of worship, once again arguing that was to prevent intimidation of members of the Jewish community. Now, as I'm sure everybody in this meeting is aware, the allegation that demonstrations that are critical of Israel or supportive of Palestinians are inherently seeking to attack Jews has long driven demands to ban protests. They've led to the smearing of demonstrators as hate marchers. We've had this situation where the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has been accused of dishonestly and recklessly claiming that march organisers are deliberately setting out with an intention to march near synagogues, which of course they completely deny because there's not a word of truth in it. What's really telling about what the messaging that came out from the Board of Deputies in that press release and that demand to crack down on protesters is what is actually contained in this new law that came into effect on the 29th of June. Because what it says is that it only allows the police, at least on paper, to lawfully impose restrictions on protests that deter people from, quotes, accessing a place of worship for the intention of carrying out religious activities or from carrying out religious activities at that place of worship. And yet, quite clearly, an illegal settlements property fair is not a religious activity. And I think one of the real concerns that emerges from that kind of the way this is being presented is that we've got really grave concerns that there will be further intense pressure from pro-Israel groups, along with the clear evidence in the Metropolitan Police's own false negative assumptions about what Palestine solidarity protests are, that risk shutting down the right to protest anywhere in an area which is perceived by organisations like the Board of Deputies or Stop the Hate or whoever as being a Jewish neighbourhood, and involve any protests that those organisations basically disagree with. And that's the reason why it's so important that we documented and challenge this version of events, because it's barely reported by the news And when it is, it's quite often reported very badly, because otherwise we're left with the perceptions amongst the wider public that a stray BBC headline and a press release from a partisan cheerleader for Israel are essentially the truth. Now, the frustration, I guess, although I'm kind of used to it now because we've done a lot when we put out work, is that there was actually very little media coverage for our report. And that's to be expected, really, because it's very difficult to be able to talk about police violence and get much of the media and most of our politicians to ever acknowledge that it exists. What we saw this report as being is a tool that can be used for two things. One, to push back against the misrepresentation of Palestine solidarity campaigners by the police themselves in order to be able to justify the often illegal restrictions that are placed on our protests, but also against that narrative of the supposed threat of Palestine solidarity campaigners, either specifically to the Jewish community or more widely to the community as a whole. And that's important because another part of the new legislation enables the police to restrict protests based on their cumulative impact. So the fact that there's been many demonstrations before. And we hope that that's what it will be used for. We did have a brief conversation with Zach Polanski's staff about whether he might comment. Although that didn't happen, it is being taken up by the members of the Green Party members of the London Assembly. But what's interesting is that there was due to be a question time today at the London Assembly, and the issue had come up, but it had been raised by Reform and Tory members of that committee, and it was quite obvious that what the intention was. It was to present Palestine solidarity activists in the way that we're always presented, right? And Ben Ali Hamish, who's the Green Party person on that committee, was ready to be able to challenge that. Now, in the end, the meeting overran and it didn't happen. But but that's where it all becomes important. It's not so much whether it gets loads of coverage; it's what you do with it that's important. How you take the information that's in there and the conclusions that are in there to challenge the way that this is being presented. And I want to just say one final thing, because that comparison made by Stop the Hate with Cable Street really, really annoys me, because I've lived in East London most of my life. Cable Street is an absolutely pivotal, it's a totemic piece of East London working class history. And there is an attempt to reshape that history by the far right. I saw something just the other day of somebody saying, "Oh, there's an attempt to write Jews out of Cable Street. They're saying it's all communists, although it wasn't all communist Jews that were the ones that mobilized, and the border deputies at the time were telling people to stay away." But more importantly, what that argument was also saying was the real alternative, the real inheritor of that struggle, is the campaign against anti-Semitism rally that's happening on the same day. It's not. It's the people that go out and march against the far right. And that's why I think we need to be prepared to, on every level, to find a way to push back against this, because if we don't, they will keep on winning those arguments. And that's something we just cannot allow to happen. So I'll leave it there. And if there's any questions, I'll answer them at the end.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Wow, I'm actually kind of surprised about like the Green GLA kind of, the Green Assembly members and let's just say like their inability to, or unwillingness to raise the issues regarding the Great Israel Real Estate Event and policing. I had no idea about that. So that is something, worth looking into. Thank you so much for that. And I just want to say thank you for your report. It was, like I said, it just captured everything that I experienced on the day. So thank you so much for that. Next up, we have Hamid from, I think Hamid is he's involved in several different organizations, Palestine Pulse being one of them. But basically, Hamid is involved in a series of movements that are trying to make sure that the police are more accountable in regards to the Great Israel Real Estate event, and they're dealing with a number of complaints. They're helping. He's helping people submit complaints and stuff like that. So basically, Hamid and Pal Pulse, they're doing a lot of work to ensure that police are held accountable for their inaction and carelessness on that day of the Great Israel Real Estate event. So, Hamid, do you want to unmute yourself and grab the mic? It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Mizan. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Mizan. Glad to be part of this panel. And to see actually many people who I have met on the day, and we've managed to kind of to speak afterwards and support each other. As you rightly said, I'm a member, part of Palestine Pulse. We do a lot of work in regards to legal aspects and taking action against the police. We have few cases going back to 1st of August from last year, all going through different phases of judicial procedure. However, this event was on a different level. The reason is we're looking at basically 3 levels that needs to be investigated and looked at. One are the attacks. So the violent disorder, the mob action that happened on the day, that is one section. The other section is police failure and police misconduct, knowing that they actually had intelligence and they were notified of this event. Yet they did not provide enough numbers, organization, etc. And the third level would be the organizers. So the synagogue directors, the people who provided security, and people who allowed this illegal event to happen. So we are looking at 3 different levels, and I think we are kind of going one by one. But the most urgent would be to get some justice for the victims who suffered injuries on the day. So as we also know that the event was condemned by 101 MPs and Lords who have written to Yvette Cooper, Foreign Secretary. They warned her that this is part of the colonial project of Israel. What did she do? She informed the Advertising Standards Authority to launch an investigation. Not to stop the event, no, to actually launch an investigation into the flyers that were used. And that was only after they were leaked. So that tells you a lot. Now, at the same time, ICGP notified the police about the potential illegality of the event, which broke the UK law, at least one of them, but they mentioned 3, including the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Serious Crime Act, and Fraud Act of 2006. We also know that this event and any similar event selling Palestinian property and land is illegal under international law, the 4th Geneva Convention. The police were also warned about high possibility of public disorder. They have seen, as you rightly said, Kevin, they've seen the flyers that were shared not only by Stop the Hate, they were also shared by Our Fight, another far-right Zionist organization with very shady tactics. And as you mentioned, they had the Battle of Edgeworth on it. They said things like they shall not pass. They were asking people together. So it was all premeditated. It was all organized activity. It wasn't something that happened organically, just suddenly. It wasn't. And the numbers show, because our numbers were less than 200 people. Their numbers were at least 1,000. So if you look at the numbers, organization, the areas they were placed at the junction, so they were placed at Broadhurst Avenue Junction with Edgeworth Way, as well as Broadfields Avenue Junction with Edgeworth Way, which are kind of leading to the synagogue itself. So they all had that pre-planned, and it was an organized thing on their side. So what happened on the ground? I mean, I was there. There are many people here who were there as well. But I'll just, I don't think I have enough time to go through each case. We did face a premeditated public disorder and violence. Plenty of crimes, as you mentioned, religious hate crimes, racial hate crimes, Vogue, which is violence against women and girls, that they were all recorded. And it was just very clear. The intention was to hurt. The intention was to cause injury. And interestingly, Kevin, we did something similar. We did a survey. We had 38 responses. So we managed to get a lot. It was a 60 question survey looking at different phases and the intentions and what happened before and after the event. Would have been useful to kind of share that data with you. I'm happy to connect after this. Our data revealed shocking numbers, basically, and facts. So half of those who were attacked en route to the protest, whereas 1/5 were attacked near the entrance. So that indicates that their strategy was to intercept and intimidate. It was organized. Another thing, when we arrived, the violence did not stop. It continued. 81 reported severe verbal abuse, including sexual threats, as well as anti-Palestinian racism and racial hatred. Almost half, i.e. 47%, were pushed to show, so that's physical. And 1/3, and this is interesting and important, 1/3 suffered injuries, which ranged from bruises, concussions, even fractures. These are all reported. 50% of those who were attacked, they were attacked by a group of 4 people or more. This also is very important because it indicates basically a disorder, violent disorder, they call it. And this is when people fear for the safety because of the actions of 3 or more people. So it just falls under violent disorder plus other assaults, including the racial and religious. The motivation, according to our survey, 100% said that the attacks were politically motivated. 2/3 said that it was racially motivated. More than half mentioned that it was religiously motivated. And for women, they were atrocious, to be honest, testimonials. Things like rape and just sexual violence, which, again, it's kind of sad to say, happened at an earshot of police officers and no action was taken. And this is very important to know. Now, trauma, on the day, 100% feared for their physical safety, whereas more than half feared for their own lives. I don't think any other survey have shown this before. 58%, they were afraid for their own lives. That's serious. Trauma did not end on that day. 72% are experiencing flashbacks. 64%, they suffer from anxiety and PTSD. And about 3/4 say the attack has impacted their work, their study, and the ability to socialize. So this impact is quite significant. Now, looking at all this trauma that happened, we can turn into looking at the police failure on the day. I mean, we collected all the data. We have a lot of footage as well. The picture that can be drawn is that one of systemic abandonment and failure, basically. The repeated phrases by officers on the day were, "We don't have enough numbers. We can't leave you on your own for your own safety." I even had one PLO, a police liaison officer, tell me that she can't leave us because if she does, then they might harm us, and because she doesn't want us to hit them. Like a group of 150 or 200 people, 80% of them girls and women, are facing a mob of at least 1,000 people. Many of them are masked males. And yet they are afraid that we will go and hit them. There's no indication of that. It was the opposite, obviously. So the police on the day, they failed to act on a high-risk event adequately. They were informed by ICJP. They should have the intelligence to start with, to look into the flyers and the organizing that happened a few days before by Stop the Hate and Our Fight. And as you mentioned, this semblance to the Battle of Edgewood, they call it, and it's like, okay, well, it's very clear what they intended to do, and knowing that they have a history of working with the far right, which was very evident on the day. They had full knowledge, they had notice from ICJP, still they failed to act on it. At some point, there were no police officers, none. So the first about 8 to 10 minutes, we did not see any police officers, and many attacks happened during that time, which is basically when we were walking into the area. As I said, 70% happened, actually half attacked en route, and 20% attacked near the entrance. So these attacks happened before the police were there. Now, this did not stop because it continued. Okay, so again, more on police failure. They failed to respond appropriately to reports of serious assault and hate crimes. Many of these assaults and attacks happened while the police were there. However, mostly were not acted on. Around 94% were not acted on, despite the police being present on the day. The lady who was threatened with rape, the person, the male who was, shouting that, he was stood next to a police officer. Nothing happened. He wasn't stopped. The male was actually telling her that he will be waiting for her after the event. So you can imagine the toll of that. Plus many other things, which, it's just too sad to kind of to mention, and quite grievous, to be honest. The police failed to provide medical assistance in timely manner. When we informed them, the answer was, well, we can't leave you. Even one sergeant, a senior officer, he was recorded saying, you have a phone on you. Why don't you use it? Call an ambulance. So this is the level of carelessness that we experienced on the day. Plus, of course, they put us in harm's way. Things like asking people who wanted to leave that they can walk through the mob. If they wanted to go, they can go through that area. And they could see that people were being attacked, but they still did that intentionally. I don't know why, how does it kind of all adds up when you see people being attacked in front of you, you ask them to go to their source of danger. And this has all been recorded. We had many disabled, we had many elderly who were struggling to stand and they wanted to leave. None of that made any difference. According to our survey, 72% described the police attitude as dismissive or uninterested, and only 1/5 saw the officers intervene to stop violence. As I said, the shocking fact that 94% reported no arrests were made despite the attacks being witnessed by the police. Also, 3/4 of the people who were there did not report the crimes, and 3/4 of them had a reason for that. They said they did not think the police would take it seriously. Sadly, they were right. This is actually a collapse of trust. It is a belief that an institution should be there to serve without favor, but unfortunately that wasn't the case on the day. Things did not stop here. So even after the event itself, the police failure continued. One case of grievous bodily harm was actually shelved for more than 3 weeks without anyone looking into it. It wasn't until the victim contacted 101 that they started moving. There were clear cases of violence against women, which were dismissed, saying there is no evidence despite video recordings. Also, one victim who was punched by a masked man, when he tried to follow up on the case, he was told that the attacker could not be identified. Well, one, the attacker was filmed on camera, and this is kind of widely available on social media. 2, the attacker was arrested on the day, so police could easily identify him. They just didn't want to do it. Now, I just have to say that despite all of this, there's only one sergeant I saw who basically managed to push them back, protected the group, and he made an arrest. He called for extra reinforcement, but that was the single occurrence that I could mention, unfortunately. So what did we do? What we done since then is that we created this support group for victims to help them cope and talk safely, and so that we can share important information with them as well. We collected data using our survey, which was done securely and anonymously, and we gained a better insight into the crimes committed and the way they were dealt with. We also looked at the short-term outcomes and the trauma that people have suffered. We collected a ton of footage documenting the crimes against protesters. These we have supplied to the police for the investigations. Now, I don't really know what will happen, what will materialize after that. However, we are doing all what we can in order to support the investigation. We have managed to identify many assailants, especially those repeated offenders. We are in contact with legal experts. We are ensuring that our actions are lawful and that we are following the correct procedures to report and escalate. We are also in contact with centers specializing in public law and civil rights. We have also done a media campaign, a big one. We have reached out to our media and press contacts, and we haven't really stopped sharing since the event. I think I'll probably just stop here. So yeah, I think I've talked a lot. So.
Thank you so much, Hamid. Yeah, very, very informative. And yeah, it just shows the importance of keeping this event alive, because we have to make sure that those people who were the victims of complete police carelessness and, you know, that's all I could say, to be honest. The police just didn't care. We have to make sure that these people get justice, and the police, the way that these demonstrations are policed, we have to challenge that, because this can't go on. So thank you to all of the speakers, Mustafa, Kevin, and Hamid. I would like to actually open up to the floor for questions. So how I want to do is, anyone that's got a question, I want you to raise your hand on Zoom. So if anyone has a question, raise your hand on Zoom. Maybe we'll take a couple, maybe 2 or 3 at the same time. I will ask you to unmute yourself, and then you have a quick, maybe 30 seconds to ask the question, and basically let us know who you're directing it to, whether it's Mustafa from PYM, whether it's Kevin from NetPol, or Hamid from PalPulse. And yeah, basically we can take it from there. So we'll take maybe 2 at a time, maybe. So Ben Samuel, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Mustafa, you mentioned the power to get the event cancelled. Obviously, Barnet Council has not made a public statement. Privately, they said that they don't have the power to get it cancelled. So I'm going to talk to Barnet Council's Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee tomorrow, and I want to be able to show them that they do have the power to cancel the event, because they're not the police. So, you know, I want to know what follow-up question to ask based on that.
Okay, so that's the first question to Mustafa. I'll let someone else ask a second question. Carol Vincent, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, good evening. I'm sorry that I was late in. I just couldn't get onto the Zoom on my phone, and I was on my way back home. But yeah, my question is related to the fact that several times I tried to report the crime, spent several hours twice on the phone to the Met Police on 101. Then eventually I had to demand that I was seen to do a statement at a police station, because there's none in my borough. However, when I arrived, the constable that arrived basically said I couldn't do a statement because the various people who were arrested, when I was injured, I was dragged across the dual carriageway, injured while the guy tried to take the Jewish bloc banner, which is 4 meters by a meter, from me. And it wasn't until he got to the middle of the concrete island at the middle of the dual carriageway that he then slammed me to the floor. and tried to run with the banner, but the police did arrest him and they've taken the banner, which they won't give back because we can't find out where it is. But also, I don't know who he is. And yeah, it's so my injuries have been noted, etc. But it was quite a shocking thing to witness, as well as people around me were being beaten by the police, were being thrown to the ground, were having their phones taken off them and thrown, and for women to be pushed about as well. The whole thing was absolutely shocking. But I've not done anything regarding doing a report because I'm also a carer to my son. So I'm in my 70s, and it's just been quite traumatic just trying to actually get things done. I haven't done a report to NetPol. You know, nobody's taken any of my information as yet. So if there's anyone who can assist, and I'm quite happy to bring a case against the police at some point. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so I think we'll just take those two kind of questions / comments. So the first one was to Mustafa about Barnet Council saying that the event was a private event and therefore they couldn't cancel it. But the individual, Ben, he's going to go to a scrutiny meeting and challenge them on that. Mustafa, do you have any response to that?
So in having our digital action, in sort of doing a email storm to Barnet Council and also to councillors who sit on it, we got the legal advice that they do actually have the power to stop it from going ahead. In terms of a response, we neither got a public nor private response to that legal advice, whether it's true, whether it's untrue. I am happy to follow up on that in terms of if a question to a scrutiny council or what type of question we would want going forward. And I think just to maybe skip ahead one bit, we are still pursuing this campaign. We are still pursuing Edgware United Synagogue. We are still going to pursue the Met Police. We are still going to pursue every single avenue that we can, legally or otherwise, to try get some either accountability or lay the ground for future action. We do believe this event will come back. And so this will be an ongoing campaign. This hasn't on our side stopped. And thanks to the efforts of NetPol and for Pulse, I think there is a lot of parallel and coordinated action that can keep this alive and going and effective in the long run.
Thank you so much. So the second comment / question was from Carol Vincent. Obviously, she had a traumatic time at a demonstration. Basically, she'd been slammed to the floor. Basically, her banner was taken, and the police haven't, returned the banner. It was traumatic. She said it was traumatic to get things done. However, if anyone can give her any advice on basically how to do something, she'll be willing to take that forward. So maybe if Kevin, if you want to comment on that, and then maybe I will give it over to Hamid as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one because over 30 years I've been helping people to make complaints against the police, and they are utterly waste of time in going anywhere, right? It's a dirty secret of the police complaint system that 95% of them are done by the police themselves still, through the Metropolitan Police's Professional Standards Department in this particular instance. I think the difference in this particular instance is that it's not a complaint just about the policing, the actions of the police, but the actions of individuals. There were people who were assaulted. They were physically assaulted. And I do think that continuing to push the Metropolitan Police to take action on that is probably the one area which is stronger. For Carol, I was just definitely linking up with the people from Palestine Pulse, because I think the crucial thing in terms of what you were asking for, which is to help to put together a statement, this is going to be so much more powerful when it's put together with collectively, when there's a group of different people doing stuff where the complaints are being overlapped. I mean, we don't really have the capacity to be able to do that kind of detailed casework level, and it's not really what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is to get it out there to the Palestine Solidarity movement to try and push back against the police's intention to use this sort of event as a way of portraying Palestine activists as being the real threat when the very nasty far right Zionist mob is clearly the threat that they should be concerned with. So that would be my suggestion. Definitely pursue the police around taking action about your assault. And unfortunately, if you don't, then you can if they don't go anywhere, which it often doesn't do, there's an awful lot of people who experiences deep frustration about the Met's inability to do anything about crimes. There is the option to make a complaint. All the usual things that I would say in these instances about dragging in your local MP and so on are all relevant. But the most important thing is just being able to do this with other people. So I would suggest talking to Palestine Pulse.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Hamid, do you want to just make a comment as well?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Kevin. I saw you on the day, actually. I saw the cut on your hand. I was stood next to you. Sorry to see that happen to you. So essentially, what we're asking people is that we have to take action, because I'm afraid next time if it happens or any similar event is organized in that area, if we do not take action now, then the attacks would be even more severe, because this needs to stop. There were attacks against women, against disabled people, racial hatred, anti-Palestinian racism. We have medical reports, Carol. So if you haven't spoken to your doctor yet, you should. So the first thing that we advise people to do, anyone who was injured, is to go and seek medical help, attend A&E, get a report, speak to your GP. You need to have that log because it helps your case. It's very important. Second thing, yes, you have to pursue it. Now, as Kevin was saying, the easier option is to go for the attackers. Yeah, and then police failure and misconduct, that is a different level. Of course, that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It needs specialist procedures. And as you probably know, police do not want to incriminate themselves, because end of the day, they have to pay compensation. So the last thing they want is for them to say, yeah, we messed up. But if you were attacked and if you have evidence of the attack, and I'm sure the officers who were there on the day, I'm sure that they have taken some body cam footage. And by the way, just so that people know, we have managed to secure the CCTV from TFL, at least from TFL, and the cameras in the surrounding area. So initially, just to show you that basically things do not work first time, but eventually they do. When I requested an SAR, a subject access request, from TFL and Barnet Council came back to me saying, well, we don't have access to the cameras. They didn't say that there are no cameras. They said we do not have access to them cameras. TFL said we cannot do anything unless it comes via the police. Well, this is nonsense, because this is a subject access request. It's something to do with me. However, they denied it. When I spoke with the detective, he said this is very unusual. They should not deny an SAR. But you see how people try not to do the work. So unfortunately, we will have to push them to do it. And we have to be persistent. We have, as Kevin was saying, if it's a collective effort, then the impact would be stronger. And this is the thing, that we have a group now who are supportive. We're getting legal advice as well. So it's all very sound. We do have a strategy. Now, it might take some time for some. However, I am being hopeful, to be honest. So it's basically collecting as much evidence as possible, medical as well as footage. We have, as I said, loads of footage that we are happy to share. And of course, going through the process. I don't know how I can contact you. If you are with IJAN, then please request my number from John or anyone else, in that group, because they are with us in the Signal group. But yeah, get in touch with us.
Also, since you mentioned IJAN, just want to say Michael Kalmanovitz is also part of the audience as well. So he's from IJAN as well. All right, guys. So the next two people who want to ask questions, first of all is Lisa. She's had her hand up for a while now. So Lisa, do you want to unmute yourself and just ask your question?
Hi, yeah. So a quick comment and then a question. Just to add some more color to this, people should also know that they were grabbing ladies' hijabs. They ripped off a keffiyeh and set it on fire, all with impunity. When we were pinned into this weird small little area on a slope, they threw things at us, eggs and liquids. We didn't know what these liquids were. It was terrifying, and it was with, complete impunity. And a lot of them were wearing their like IDF, imagery to indicate that they had served. Which is, also an intimidation. And there was lots of homophobia as well. And so my question to Mustafa and Hamid is, reflecting on everything, do you have any thoughts or any advice on, like, what does organizing and mobilizing look like? Because this Edgeware was such an escalation, and they had such impunity. There were times where it almost looked like the police were collaborating with them. There were these weird guys with, like, like Secret Service, like toxin. They have like little earpiece. Like there was like this whole earpiece, like these guys acting like, intelligence officers. It all seemed very collaborative and in coordination. And I'm just not clear on, like, as organizers and activists, what should we be doing anything different moving forward in putting, when we're putting events like this together?
Thank you so much, Lisa. Before I go to Jim, I'm going to come with you in a second. I do have just a quick thoughts about what Lisa said in terms of the mobilizing. Yeah, like I was, like, just like yourself, I was there as well at the event, and it was a shock to see, like, a lot of members of the town come out with their racism and stuff like that. But at the same time, the fact that it took some organizing shows that basically, for me, the numbers were going to be lower if it wasn't for the organizing that the Zionists done. And I say that because if, for example, if a pro-Israel group tried to do a demonstration in Whitechapel, for example, or a kind of an area where it's highly sympathetic for the Palestinians, we wouldn't need to do no organizing. People would be out on the streets. There'd be like 10,000 people, basically. So, for us, it was a shock to see that. But at the same time, the fact that the numbers were low, it did kind of give me hope, because if it was any other area, even without the organizing, I reckon the Palestinian side would have been the numbers would have been a lot more higher. So I do take kind of solace from that. But I want to give the mic now to Jim. Jim, you've had your hand up for a while now, so do you want to unmute?
Oh, yes. Hello there. Can you hear me okay? Brilliant. Thanks a lot. And thank you for putting together this meeting. It's really valuable. I just to say that I'm working along with Hamid, and it's not so much a question. It's more to say, and maybe on the back of what Lisa just said about what does mobilizing look like. Well, I'd just like to encourage everybody, if you want to submit a complaint or a report, there is a group for you, and we've been organizing this since pretty much the evening of the 14th, and we are signal based, and we have currently around 60 members. But what we are looking to do, as Hamid has really well, as he's explained in such depth, is obviously to flood the police with these complaints, so like we can really build the narrative that this was a mass event. Just to give you some idea as to the level of work that we've been doing behind the scenes, we've created several documents, as Hamid has said, that go into identifying certain suspects and looking at particular incidents, especially attacks on women, and we go into some pretty microscopic detail into showing how these took place. And as you said, Lisa, projectiles being thrown, liquids being thrown, and numerous incidences. And like, there is obviously more to do, but I'd just like to say before this meeting's out, I'm not sure the best way of giving people the contact details, but please, if you want to get involved, and we encourage it, please leave your details, and then hopefully we can add you to the group. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Hold on. Let me just unmute the person. Right. So, so Lisa asked a question to Mustafa and Hamid, basically thoughts and advice on what mobilizing looks like, in light of the Great Israel Real Estate event. So, if what are your thoughts on what mobilizing would look like, getting people together, organizing against this type of stuff? So, Mustafa, do you want to go first, and then Hamid can go afterwards?
Yeah, sure, definitely. It's a difficult question, and it's one we're still trying to answer ourselves. I think I need to avoid being prescriptive here and be a little bit more disciplined in what I say. Just suffice to say that this was an unprecedented mobilization for a lot of sort of the wider London-based movements, and the experience therein was really only sort of with IJAN and maybe Jazza in terms of mobilizing in North London before on sort of their territory where they're stronger, and with them having a concerted sort of mobilization to counter it. I think whatever happens in future, it won't be the same as this time. I think there will be a concerted effort to sort of reassess these assumptions, and we are. To not make the same assumptions about the police's role, to not make assumptions about the potential confrontations with Zionists, and then to assess from there how we prepare ourselves, what trainings we need, and what we need to do going forward, how we need to prepare people coming to a mobilization with the expectation that Zionists might be en route and potentially intercepting them. I think there's a lot of things that need to go into this going forward, and it is being worked on, but I can't be too prescriptive and say, okay, this is how it's going to happen next time, or this is how it should happen next time. I do just want to caveat that we are aware of risks. We try to mitigate them as much as we can, but certain confrontations are unavoidable. Like it can't be the reaction to this, as horrific it has been and as traumatizing as it has been to a lot of the people here and a lot of the wider movement, to then be like, okay, we will not mobilize for such an event going forward. I think even despite them coming away feeling sort of maybe victorious or from that, or coming on top of on that day, I think from the aftermath, we actually succeeded in a lot of areas where they didn't. I think we've come out stronger in a way in where they haven't. Our lions are the ones that are coming out. So our mobilization is seen as the one that's justified, whereas theirs isn't. A lot of the footage that we have can create agitational material and will be used in legal cases and will be used sort of in going forward. We have a better idea of the companies behind this, of the synagogues and their sort of relationship, and then how to pressure them through legal campaigns and other sort of tactics. I think going ahead, there'll be a reformulation of not just how we mobilize, but how we can be more effective in our campaign tools as well.
Thank you. Hamid, do you want to go next?
So yeah, so thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I second what you said. So projectiles were thrown, there were eggs, as well as snooker balls, and liquids. At the time, people didn't know what sort of liquids, which created quite a scare. Some people said there was some alcohol as well. Interestingly, and before I forget, many of these attackers were seen to be extremely aggressive, under the influence. So that's also very important to kind of to remember. They were not normal on the day. So how do we go forward? I think it's very good to network with people. So I'm not sure if you are part of a group. There are different groups who mobilize in London, and some of them have quite an experience with it, being on the street for the last 3 years or so. For example, when we mobilize, we tend to have meetings for a few weeks, actually, repeated meetings to make sure that we have a safe entry and a safe exit. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I don't think it was during this event. So kind of planning ahead is one important thing. Knowing what to expect. I don't think anyone expected the amount of aggression and violence on the day. However, we have to factor that in for the future. Also, rather than saying what we need to do in the future, I think we can also focus on what we're doing now. So if we manage to push through with this, then we could possibly and hopefully stop it happening. Because if we can basically get those attackers arrested, if they stand justice, then others would be deterred. So I think this is the kind of the time to be doing more work and getting them behind bars. Because unless and until we do that, I don't think it will change much. So things that we can do now, and this is a thing that you, if you haven't done already, is basically join the group, talk to us, see what we can support you with. And I'm hoping that the investigation would come up with something positive in our favor. I can only hope. I'm doing all the work. We are doing the work. So that's all we can kind of promise you, is that we are working on it. For the last month, and Jim is here, he can testify, we've been working around the hour to identify them, to collect information, to put it in secure folders, to go through it again and again and again. So there is a lot of work being done. So I think now is the time to do something about it. And in the future, it is something for the wider street activists, let's say, organizers, to basically sit down and look at the safe entry, safe exit, and getting as much numbers. So again, remember that our strength is in our numbers. We need to get as many as possible next time, because I know some groups went to attend another event in Birmingham. Other groups were advised not to do anything on the day, to stay home. And unfortunately, this is what you get when there is lack of coordination. So it's also good to have this kind of, feedback of what happened on the day, so that we can avoid it happening again. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree. I just want to say also another thing people can do, and it's a simple thing. Obviously, join the groups, join Hamid with Pulse and everything, and sending those complaints. But another thing, a simple thing people could do, is download NetPol's report, One Day in Edgware, read it and share it with your contacts, share it with everyone. I even sent mine to my police complaints handler, because she didn't seem to understand how upset I was. So I sent her the report and I told her to read it and share it everywhere. I do know that this is something Kevin kind of wanted. They want a police response. So I sent mine to the complaints handler. So basically share the report. That's the simplest thing we can do. Even if you don't want to raise a complaint, we would suggest you raise a complaint. But if you don't, there's something you could do. Download NetPol's report, read it, share it, talk about it to your family members, friends, and your colleagues and everyone. All right, so this is gonna be the one last round of Q&As. So people who have had their hands up for a while, Neil, Venta, Lubna, and Ben Martin. So basically, I'm gonna start off with Neil. So Neil, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hey guys. Yeah, thanks for this. I've got a question specifically. Okay, so Mustafa and Hamid, you've both given information about how Mustafa, you spoke about how you organize and how you try to keep things confidential about what was happening on the day, make sure the police were not notified. And then Hamid has basically explained to us that the implications of that. And I'm worried that if that is the strategy to sort of keep things secret, that groups then arrive, women arrive, and then are attacked by thugs, and the police are expected to take charge for something they're not even, they're thinking they're policing around a small event or people arriving, and suddenly people turn up and mobs turn up. I'm wondering if not the strategy, but the strategy conflicts with the result and what's actually happened.
Okay, thank you so much. So wondering if the strategy conflicts with the result. Okay, right. Lubna, do you want to go next?
Hi, yes. I think I agree basically with everything that's been said, and Hamid's point about the basically collaborative efforts, I think, is vital when all groups, I mean, of course, we're spread so thinly across the movement with so much happening. It's hard to keep up with half of it half the time and what you're going to do when. We need like a collaborative diary, at least, where we can try not to overlap certain actions, or if there is an important or a vital action, that we basically rally the comrades to it. And a situation like this, of course, you know, you're thinking, well, now that we know that there is a tendency of violence, we need to be, and this is a good example of why we now need to take extra preparative measures to all be able to join forces across the movement and different groups. And this isn't limited just to the grassroots activism. It's also inclusion of, like, you've got the legal, the political, the trade union level, and tying that all in together, it is a powerful force. And we also must challenge the use of synagogues as a front for illegal activities and funding of war crimes and schooling to then become, for their children to become the next IOF occupiers of our homeland. These are all things that must be challenged, and to prepare people with organization and of what's to come, what is coming. We're facing literally fascism on our doorsteps now. So the increase in violence is likely expected to rise. It's either we sit back and do nothing, or we're going to have to prepare better. And self-defense is no offense. Love and solidarity to everyone who is there. And we must be better organized for the next ones, because there are going to be a lot more, and things will often get worse before they get better. And on a political front, I'd just like to add here, you want to change things and support our Zionism is racism motion, please join us in the Green Party conferences coming up. The tickets are now online. We have to change things. This can change the face of British politics, send a message, and call for a single democratic Palestinian state with equal rights for all and the right of return for all of us Palestinians and descendants. So much love and solidarity, and see you on the front line.
Thank you so much, Lubna, for your comment. I was actually going to say, I was actually going to come in and say that you are the writer and proposer of the Zionism is racism motion, and we need to support that. So yeah, we definitely support you all the way, sis. So basically, all right. So we're gonna have two more. We've got two more contributions. These are going to be the last two. So Ben Martin, and then Kevin wants to make a contribution after this. So Ben, do you want to go first?
Yes, it's a simple question. I understand that Sadiq Khan, the mayor, was against the event at the synagogue, or at least he said so. And given that he's also supervising the Met or something like that, I'm not sure what kind of power he had. Do you think that targeting Sadiq Khan could be an effective way of winning something?
Targeting Sadiq Khan. Actually, I think that will be a good question for Kevin to actually answer.
It is a very good question for me.
Kevin,
Yes,
you've got a contribution as well to make, so you could
well,
do both of them at the same time.
it was a final point, but I do have very strong views on the utterly useless nature of the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, who are a utter waste of space. It is really important, though, that we use. I think it's really important that we use the London Assembly as a way of putting pressure on the mayor, and in particularly on this issue where he had spoken out against the event itself. The problem, I mean, that's partly because the London Assembly doesn't get lobbied that often. It's not like pushing towards local MPs, and you're much more likely to get a response. Obviously, the primary area where that was likely to work will be within the Police and Crime Committee, which has got a number of people who are, shall I just say, not the brightest and best that London has to offer, who are from Reform and within the Conservatives. But certainly you should direct any and put your complaints, put your concerns through Ben Ali Hamish, who's just taken over as the Green Party's London Assembly member on that committee. He's taken over from Zoe Garber, but also the Labour people in there. I mean, how that will work, I don't know, but it's worth doing, because for the almost the only reason that you're most likely to get a response. You're most likely to get some feedback from it, which of course you often don't if you're trying to push MPs. And also writing directly to the mayor is also worthwhile doing too. So if people are looking for something simple that they can do, that is something that I would suggest. The point I wanted to raise, in over and above the other conversations that are happening about strategy, which are obviously something which I'm less wanting to comment on because it's kind of like people who are doing organizing these processes should be in a position to be able to make those decisions. I just want to emphasize the point again of just how worried we are about this new piece of legislation, this idea that that the police have got powers to restrict protests that are about places of worship, because it's largely untested. It's only just come in. There is a tendency for the police to, when they get new powers, to go ahead and use them, and we have real concerns that the way that those are going to be used are going to be dictated by the police's conversations with the board of deputies, with the community security trust, and with other organisations who, frankly, are not are ill disposed towards any form of Palestinian solidarity. So that's something that people need to bear in mind. It's certainly something, if it's getting used again, that we really desperately want to hear about, because ultimately this law needs to go. There was no basis for it in the first place. It's certainly not going to be used for the institutions that have been attacked the most often over the last 5 years, which is, both synagogues and mosques. It was brought in entirely as another stick to beat the Palestine solidarity movement, but we need to know how it's being used. So if that's something also that you can take on, if you're organizing anything and you hear about either the use of this power or the threat of the use of this power, because both of them are important, please let us know.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I think we'll start to wrap things up right there. People are asking for contact details. So since Kevin, you're up. I mean, you're literally, I can see you now. Kevin, can you just explain to people how they can contact you, and then basically Mustafa can jump in and explain how they can contact PYM, and then Hamid with PalPal. So Kevin, if you could just start and explain to people how they can contact you.
Well, the easiest and most secure way is to send. We have a separate Proton Mail account, which is NetPol admin, NETPOL admin @protonmail.com. That's accessible by just two of us from our team, myself and our researcher. It's also more secure. So I would suggest that that's the easiest way to get hold of to let us know about any other developments. Certainly, separately, the work that Palestine Pulse has been doing on the sort of the casework time stuff, I would be really interested to know the outcomes of that, not necessarily sharing of the information, but what happens next. So if you could let us know through that, that would be great. I'll put that email address in the chat now as well, okay?
Thanks. So it's netpoladmin @protonmail.com. Okay, right. So Mustafa, how can people get in touch with Palestine Youth Movement?
So you can email us at the britainpym@gmail.com account. Otherwise, if you have comrades with IJAN, Jazza, PalPulse, they can put you through to us as well via Signal, and we can sort of directly speak on there.
Thank you. Also, Ealing Friends of Palestine. That's how I got in contact.
Also, Ealing Friends of
Palestine. Yeah. So yeah, Britain PYM gmail.com. That's fine. And basically, if Hamid can let us know how they can get in contact with PalPulse, how people can get in contact with PalPulse. So Hamid, do you want to go up next?
Yeah, sure. So one of the easiest ways is if you could email us. Our email is palpulse@pm.me. PM is Proton Mail, basically. So just initials. palpulse@pm.me. Also, if you are in the street activism in London, it's quite easy to find us. Or you can search PalPulse or Palestine Pulse on Instagram. So these are kind of the easiest ways. Also, I believe that Jim, my comrade, has already shared the Signal group. So you can also get in touch via the Signal group, or if you're a member of IJAN, member of Greenwich Palestine Alliance or Greens for Palestine, or if you know anyone in the camp, they could all get in, get you in touch with us. So I think it's quite easy and accessible.
Thank you so much. Well, we're just going to round up this event right now. Thank you so much for coming. Again, listen, guys, support organizations like PalPulse, PYM, NetPol. Find out more about them. Obviously, if you were there at the event and if you haven't submitted a complaint, please do so. The people from PalPulse can help you. And also NetPol's report, One Day in Edgeware. Share it, download it, read it, share it, and let's keep on talking about it. I feel as though this has been a great event, and to be honest with you, it's raised my energy a little bit. I hope it has for everyone else as well. And I think this is the start of something good where we can make sure that the police are more accountable to us rather than the pro-Israeli lot. Let's put it that way. And hopefully we could do something now so that we make sure that those who are take part in future demonstrations, they will not have to experience what we've experienced. So thank you so much. I'm going to call it a day.
Mizan,
Yeah.
can I just say one thing just to finish off positively?
Make it quick.
Yeah. Last Tuesday evening, a man was attacked by a racist fascist in Leighton outside Nur al-Islam Mosque. And it's part of Waltham Forest. Waltham Forest has been the place where the fascists dare to come, and we come out in our thousands and tens of thousands, as we did 2 years ago. Well, last night, there were over 100 people came out in solidarity from all walks of the community, all faiths, all creeds and colours and so on, all ages, to say, not in our patch, not on our streets, and it will never be on our streets. So solidarity, an injury to one is an injury to all, and the people united will never be defeated.
The people united, and also free Palestine from the river.
Free Palestine from the river to the sea.
Yeah, thank you. Guys. Thank you guys so much. Okay, guys, take care. I'm gonna go and find out what the England score is, but yeah, guys. Take care, okay? And I hope you guys have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Palestine.
Thank you.
Thank you.